The Week 7 slate is kicking off tonight when the Denver Broncos travel to New Orleans to face the Saints. And today, I'm going to be breaking down everything you guys need to know to set your fantasy football lineups. This is matchups that matter. I go through all of the over-unders, all of the implied totals, where the sharps are betting to help you guys best set your fantasy football lineups. And we go over 5 key matchups, including wide receiver cornerback stuff, who has good matchups, who has bad matchups. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. Like I said, the Thursday night football game, Denver Broncos, New Orleans Saints. Bit of a snoozer, admittedly, but we do have some fantasy relevant players potentially going tonight. Not many of them, but we do have some. Broncos are 2.5-point road favorites going to New Orleans. Neither team is implied for more than 20 points. The over-under is the lowest on the slate. There are 2 teams on bye, the Bears and the Cowboys, which means there are 15 total games on the Week 7 slate and 30 teams in action this week. The over is catching a little bit of the money. 37-point over-under, 79% of the cash right now is on the over. The pace of play is top 5 on the entire slate, so it's a little bit of a fast-paced game environment. But generally speaking, this is not the type of game environment you want to be attacking with your fantasy football matchups. If you look at it, both quarterbacks have bottom 3 matchups. Not that anybody was going to start Bo Nix or Spencer Rattler anyway, but not a great situation there. Both running backs have top 12 matchups, so if you are looking for, obviously you're going to be starting Alvin Kamara, but if you are looking for an RB2 play this week, I don't think Javonte Williams is necessarily the worst one you could go after, although we'll see how Audric Estime works into this backfield. Cortland Sutton has a tough matchup against primarily Marshawn Lattimore, but the Saints corners in general. And then you look at the Saints wide receivers, of which Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave are not expected to play tonight. You're looking at Bub Means and Mason Tipton and Cedric Wilson. You're not starting any of those guys. I know people are starting to try and get cute here and say that Bub Means is a good start because he had decent usage last week. Not in this matchup. I realize Patrick Surtain is not going to play in this game with a concussion, but given the over-under, there's just way better game environments to go out and attack. You can pick up Ray McLeod right off of your waiver wire and start him in a better game environment instead of playing Bub Means in this game environment. That's just my 2 cents on Bub Means. Both defenses and kickers in play for sure. You could definitely fire up the Broncos or the Saints defense and then the kickers as well, given that this game is not expected to be high scoring. Typically, we see kickers perform in game environments like that because most of these bad offenses can't execute in the red zone, ergo they kick field goals. So moving into the London game. So we do have one more London game this week. The Jaguars stay in London after playing last week in London. They are going to be playing against the Patriots this week. 5.5-point favorites. So even though they came off a pretty brutal loss to the Bears last week, they are favored by quite a bit. 24 implied points. The over-under is 42.5. Over catching a lot of the money, 94% of the cash here. The Jags project to be in a pretty good spot here, have the 8th highest DVOA advantage. So basically these DVOA things, all they mean is the Jacksonville offense versus the Patriots defense. What is the advantage percentage-wise? And Jacksonville's DVOA advantage is 8th highest on the slate. As far as key matchups to pay attention to in this game, Drake May is definitely a viable streamer going up against the 32nd ranked Jaguars defense. I talked about Caleb Williams as a streamer last week. Look how that worked out. He had 4 touchdowns in that game. Both running backs have top 8 matchups, so we don't exactly know whether the starting running back for both teams, Etienne and Ramondre Stevenson, are going to be active in this game, but if they're both out, of course, Tank Bigsby, Dearness Johnson potentially, and Antonio Gibson are going to be viable starts because of the matchups that they have. Brian Thomas Jr. is expected to see shadow coverage from Christian Gonzalez, so it could be more of an Evan Ingram game, could be more of a Christian Kirk game because of that matchup. Demario Douglas versus the Jaguars secondary is an easy matchup. We saw pretty much every Bears wide receiver have their way with the Jaguars secondary last week. I wouldn't mess around with any other Patriots wide receivers, though. The Jags passing offense has about an average matchup across the board. So if you need to start Trevor Lawrence, I think you could do it, especially given the point total. If you need to start Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, those type of guys, I think you could definitely go ahead and do that. So moving into the 1 p.m. slate, we have 7 games in the 1 p.m. window, 3 games in the 4 p.m. window. And then we do have a Monday Night Football doubleheader this week, so there is one less game in the Sunday slate that we're looking at here. Eagles at Giants is the first game we're going to talk about. The Eagles are 3-point road favorites. We are looking at the Saquon Barkley revenge game in the New York Giants MetLife Stadium this week. So this one's going to be challenging because I play against Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, and A.J. Brown in my home league, so I am scared that the Eagles are going to put up a big-time point production game against the Giants just because I play against them. The game environment's a little ho-hum. I mean, 43-point over-under is not that exciting. Actually, the lowest amount of cash on the over of the entire slate. Pace of play is about average. Philadelphia's DVOA is about average, maybe slightly above. And then the Giants' DVOA is actually quite interesting that it is 10th because the Eagles' defense is not very good. And the Giants expect to get an influx of Malik Nabers, their number one wide receiver, coming off of his concussion. The Giants haven't officially cleared him from the concussion protocol yet, but they are optimistic that he is going to clear the protocol by the end of the week. So that is good news for Giants fans and for Malik Nabers managers. Both quarterbacks have above average matchups. So if you are looking to stream a quarterback, I think Daniel Jones is definitely viable. They are at home. He's getting Malik Nabers back. It's definitely a decent spot. Of course, Jalen Hurts is in your lineup all the time. Both running backs also have league average matchups. So again, Saquon Barkley revenge game. He is one of my highest rated running backs this week. And if you're looking for other running back production, again, we don't know if Devin Singletary is going to play. We don't know if Tyrone Tracy is going to be the lead back again. If Singletary is active, I would say that he's probably like an RB3 type. But if he is out again, we know that Tyrone Tracy can be a top 20 guy. A.J. Brown is expected to see shadow coverage versus Deonte Banks of the New York Giants. He's not very good. I mean, he's not, shutting guys down. So even though it says shadow coverage, I have very big confidence that A.J. Brown will be able to win that matchup. The Eagles, however, are 32nd in pass defense DVOA versus opposing number one wide receivers. Now, like I just said, Malik Nabers happens to be coming back for the New York Giants, who is clearly their number one wide receiver. So he should be back with a bang against the Philadelphia Eagles. Both pass defenses are about average versus wide receivers and tight ends in general. So if you want to play Devontae Smith or Wan'Dale Robinson or some of these other guys outside of AJ and Malik, who I already talked about, you could definitely go ahead and do that. Tight end wise, I mean, Dallas Goedert probably not going to be active for this game, so you probably don't want to mess with Grant Calcaterra or Theo Johnson in this one, but if you were really desperate, I suppose you could. Seahawks at Falcons, the next game that we're going to talk about here. Falcons are 3-point favorites at home. The game is extremely high-scoring game environment here. 27 points implied for the Falcons. 24 points implied for the Seahawks. The over-under is set at 51 points, which is the second highest on the entire slate. The combined pace of play, the Seahawks are first in pace of play. The Falcons are third in pace of play. So this is the highest pace of play combined game of the slate, and it's not even particularly close. So this is going to be a really fast-paced, high-scoring environment. Both offenses have top 5 advantages against the opposing defenses because Falcons' pass defense hasn't been very good. Seahawks' pass defense, especially as of late, hasn't been very good. Some of the key matchups to pay attention to. Both quarterbacks definitely viable streamers this week. If you need to pick up a quarterback because you have Dak on bye or Caleb Williams on bye or whatever, Geno Smith, you can't really go wrong there. You can't really go wrong with Kirk Cousins. I would prefer Kirk Cousins because his team is at home. He has the higher implied point total, but I really feel good about both of these guys. Kenneth Walker in for a bit of a tougher matchup against the Atlanta Falcons' top 6 run defense. They've been pretty strong against the run all year long. DK Metcalf is expected to see shadow coverage versus AJ Terrell, so it might be another game where we see JSN, we see Tyler Lockett get heavily involved as far as like a target share is concerned. Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier versus the Seahawks run defense. They are 20th against the fantasy running back position in adjusted fantasy points allowed. And then Kyle Pitts actually has the easiest matchup of any tight end on the entire slate. So he is a must-start player this week. And Drake London also has a top 10 matchup among all wide receivers this week. So very, very good for anybody involved. Like, I mean, you have Metcalf, you have JSN, you have London, you have Pitts, you have Bijan, you have Walker. You're firing it up. I don't even think it's outrageous. Like, if you're desperate and you needed to throw a Zach Charbonnet into your lineup, a Darnell Mooney, even a Ray McLeod, or a Tyler Lockett into your lineup, you could get cute enough in this game, given the point total, given the pace of play, that you could convince me to really start anybody in this one. Like, I'm in our Flock League, for example, I'm really down bad at my RB2 slot. If I don't get, another game where JT is out and I can throw Tyler Goodson in or something like that, I might actually have to start Zach Charbonnet, even though Kenneth Walker is healthy, just because of the game environment that we're looking at in that Seahawks-Falcons game. So moving into the Texans at Packers, you guys can see all the information there. Top 5 over-under. Highest percentage of the money that is on the over right now, 96% of the cash, and then about league average matchups across the board. After that, pretty high implied point total for Green Bay of 25 points, 22.5 for the Texans. Some of the key matchups for this game. This one will be really interesting. You got 2 of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. Both quarterbacks have league average matchups, but you're probably starting both of them, Jordan Love and CJ Stroud, both inside my top 10 quarterbacks for the week. Josh Jacobs has a brutal matchup against the Texans run defense. I'm on a little bit of alert with Josh Jacobs. He hasn't been really great this year from a fantasy perspective. He's not giving you any real spike weeks. He's kind of just been, RB21 this week, RB17 the next week. He's just been okay. as opposed to like getting high-end, fantasy production. Tank Dell and Romeo Doubs have some very advantageous matchups across the board. The Texans wide receivers, Diggs and Dell, and the Packers wide receivers, Doubs, Watson, and Jaden Reed, they all have kind of like average matchups across the board. But when you look at fantasy points, wide receiver, cornerback matchups, the best matchup on the field for the Texans is Dell versus the secondary, primarily Jair Alexander of the Green Bay Packers, who's having a bit of a rough season. And then Romeo Doubs on the other side of that matchup against I believe the left side cornerback for the Houston Texans is a pretty good matchup there. So again, average matchups generally speaking, but Doubs and Dell have good advantages. Joe Mixon versus the Packers run defense, about average matchup there. And then if you're looking for streaming defenses this week, I think the Packers are not a bad option. Quietly, they're the second best streaming defense in the entire fantasy football landscape right now. They are second in defensive points per game, even though they've played some tough matchups. The Cardinals, who had a pretty decent offense last week, they blew them out. I could see them having a good performance, getting sacks, getting turnovers, and scoring points on the defensive side of things. So if you need a defense and all the good ones are taken, I think the Packers are a half-decent option. And then Dalton Schultz, if you need a tight end option, Tucker Kraft, of course, too, if you need a tight end option, are both inside my top 12. Bengals at Browns, not a good fantasy landscape at all, really. I mean, the Browns just traded away Amari Cooper. This game doesn't project to be super great for them. The Bengals are 6-point road favorites going to Cleveland, but the Browns actually have had the Bengals number to some degree, so this one could be a little bit closer than some people are thinking. Low over-under, bottom 3 on the slate. Over percentage money is low on the slate as well. The only real saving grace we have here is that the Cincinnati offensive DVOA versus the Cleveland defensive DVOA is pretty high, so the Bengals should be okay as far as Chase and Higgins and Burrow and those type of guys. Burrow does have a top, half of the league matchup. Both run defenses are top 12, though, so not a great matchup for Chase Brown. Not a good matchup for Nick Chubb, who expects to make his season debut in this game. Jerome Ford likely out for the next couple of games with a hamstring injury. It'll probably be some combination of like 30, 40, maybe 50% Nick Chubb with Deontay Foreman and Pierre Strong kind of mixed in there. Not exactly excited to start Nick Chubb in his first game back, but I would like to see kind of how he looks and if he looks like he's kind of still explosive and things of that nature. Chase Brown's been great as of late. He's probably still starting for a lot of people as a top 24 guy, but not a great matchup there. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, both very, very solid matchups against Cleveland's secondary. The Browns passing game in general has good matchups across the board. The question is, are you starting any of these guys? Like, are you starting Jerry Jeudy? Are you starting, we got some word that Elijah Moore is going to be a bigger part of the offense. The only must-start player on the Browns offense, in my opinion, is David Njoku. I have him as a top 6 tight end this week. I do think because he has a top 5 matchup, because he had, really commanded a big time share of the team's targets even before Amari Cooper had gone over to the Buffalo Bills, I think David Njoku solidifies himself probably as a top 8 tight end rest of season and definitely a top 6 tight end in this matchup. The Bengals defense also a very, very good streamer this week because Watson has been very turnover prone, very sack prone this season. So moving into the Lions at Vikings, also staying in the 1 p.m. slate here. The Vikings are 1.5 point favorites against the Lions, which kind of perked my ears up. I get the Vikings are at home and they've been very good this year, but I tend to think the Lions are the better team and probably win this game outright. The over-under very high on this one, 50.5 points, over catching a lot of the money. Pace of play is up there. Quietly, very bad matchups for the DVOA advantages because even though the Vikings and the Lions have positive DVOA, the defenses that they're going up against, Vikings have been very strong on defense. Detroit very strong, at least as a run defense. Maybe they take a little bit of a hit now with Aiden Hutchinson probably out for the year, but still, that perked my ears up a little bit. Key matchups, as far as I can see here, the quarterbacks and running backs, not in good spots. Bottom 5 matchups for both of them. The wide receiver cores, however, do have good matchups. So if you're looking to start Jefferson and Addison and St. Brown and Jameson Williams, they all have very good matchups. Sam Laporta versus the Vikings defense, that is a weak spot of their defense against the tight end position, so he is in a very, very good spot there. And then if you're looking for kicker production, I think both the Lions and Vikings kickers are in play because of the over-under. It is 50-plus points, and you want high-scoring game environments for those kickers. And especially if the DVOA shows up in the red zone, which it usually does, then we might see a lot of field goal attempts from both of those respective offenses. So moving into the next game here, we have the Tennessee Titans at the Buffalo Bills. Not a very high-scoring game environment, as you guys can see. The Bills are implied for 25.25 points, which is great. They're 9.5-point favorites at home in this one. The DVOA matchup they have is top 10. As far as key matchups that we're looking at here, the quarterback position, below average matchups. Of course, you are still starting Josh Allen as a top 5 quarterback each and every week. Tony Pollard has a great matchup here. 32nd ranked run defense. We saw Breece Hall get back on track against the Bills. We saw what Derrick Henry did to them 2 weeks ago. They are really bad against the run. Tony Pollard expects to be without Tajay Spears in his backfield, so he is probably going to have a big time game. He is in my top 12 running backs for me this week. Amari Cooper and Khalil Shakir, not really in the greatest spot as far as the Titans pass defense. They're actually first against fantasy wide receivers, and they are first against fantasy tight ends. So Dalton Kincaid not in a great spot there either. And then just some spare parts stuff. The Bills running backs, whether it is James Cook or Ray Davis who gets the start, not in a very good spot here. Bottom 10 matchup against the run. And then the Titans wide receivers, Ridley and Hopkins, bottom 10 wide receiver matchup against the Bills there. So moving into the Dolphins at Colts, you guys can see the matchup information there. Very fast pace of play game. We do have Anthony Richardson back starting for the Indianapolis Colts by all reports. We don't actually know, I think, yet who is going to start for the Dolphins. I would imagine it's going to be Tyler Huntley, but Skylar Thompson was practicing in full coming off of the bye, so it's possible that they go back to him. We'll have to kind of wait and see what happens at the quarterback position there. I would not start Anthony Richardson because the Dolphins are first against fantasy quarterbacks right now, and Richardson is coming off of a multi-week absence. Don't really feel great about him. Achane and Jonathan Taylor, assuming Taylor plays. Achane already cleared the concussion protocol. He should be good to go. Very good matchups, top 10 matchups across the board. If Jonathan Taylor is out, Tyler Goodson is my preference of the two running backs because he has been much more efficient. Trey Sermon missed practice on Wednesday. I do think that Tyler Goodson would be my preference of the two running backs, assuming JT is out, which it looks like he could be out yet again because I believe he missed practice yesterday and potentially today as well. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle versus the Colts pass defense. I think they can get back on track in this one. Hopefully, we get some functional offense from the Dolphins here, whether it is Huntley or Skylar Thompson throwing the ball. I think Hill and Waddle might be able to get back on track here. And then Pittman and Downs versus the Miami pass defense is a bad matchup, and I don't love the matchup just when Anthony Richardson is starting in general because Flacco has clearly been the better passer of the two of them so far, and I kind of want to wait and see what happens with this offense. If I had to start one of them, it would be Downs because the matchup's a little bit easier for him in the slot, but at the same time, I don't really want to start either of them. So moving into the Raiders at Rams, I believe we are into the 4 p.m. slate now. We do have the Rams implied for 25 points. They are 6.5-point favorites here, and they have a pretty solid DVOA advantage versus the Raiders defense. And of course, the Raiders just traded away Devontae Adams. Of course, they haven't had him for the last couple of weeks, but the offense looks to be a little bit weakened now that Adams is gone. Matthew Stafford versus the Vegas pass defense is a very, very good spot, and Cooper Kupp could make his return back from the high ankle sprain. It sounds like it is tracking to be the case where Cooper Kupp is going to be back on the field. He is probably going to start for the Rams at outside wide receiver, and that puts Matthew Stafford back in play as a streaming quarterback because, you know, he's not throwing to Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson every single play. If Cooper Kupp is out there, that would be great news for Matthew Stafford's fantasy value as a decent streamer. Both run defenses are bottom 8, so Kyron Williams and Alexander Mattison are both going to be solid plays. Kyron is inside my top 5 running backs. Alexander Mattison, again, we'll have to wait and see if Zamir White plays in this game, but even if White is playing, I think Madison's the lead back here and probably is a top 30 play at the running back position. Both pass defenses are below average, so Kupp is probably going to scorch, and I do think that Jacoby Myers is a half-decent play at wide receiver for the Raiders as well. Brock Bowers versus the Rams defense, easy pickings there. I think he is going to be just excellent for the rest of the year. They're just going to throw him the ball like crazy without Adams there, and stream the Rams defense and kicker if you are looking for some special teamers from that game. Panthers at Commanders. This one, the highest over-under on the entire slate, 51.5 points. The Commanders nearly implied for 30 points themselves with a minus 8-point favorite on a 51.5-point spread. Their DVOA matchup versus the Panthers defense is the best on the entire slate. They have a great offense. The Panthers defense is atrocious, so this is a very good spot for them. Looking at some key matchups, here's a short answer for you. Everybody is startable in this game. Both quarterbacks are startable, even though obviously Daniel's like my quarterback 1 on the week and Dalton is more of like a low-end streamer. He's still startable given the fact that the matchup is so juicy for the Commanders secondary. And both running backs have top 5 matchups. Brian Robinson, Chuba Hubbard, assuming they're healthy, they're in your lineup. If Robinson is out again, then we are looking at Austin Eckler yet again for the Commanders. And then both wide receiver cores, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, both going to be in a very good good spot to put up point production. And like I said earlier, when people are, talking about starting Bub Means or whatever, I would much rather take a shot on a Commanders or a Panthers wide receiver in this game versus, starting Bub Means on Thursday Night Football. I would rather pick up, Xavier Legette and throw him into my lineup. I would rather pick up Noah Brown and throw him into my lineup, or maybe even Jalen Coker or Luke McCaffrey and throw them into my lineup before I put Bub Means out there, because that game environment's just not nearly as good as this one. Even the tight ends are streamable, man. Like Zach Ertz, even Jatavian Sanders, who's been running over 75% of the routes and getting some targets the last couple of games. JT Sanders, Hook'em Horns obviously had 7 targets last week, so he might be a streamable tight end here coming up in this matchup. Start the kickers, not the defenses. We do not want to be starting the defenses in this high over-under of a game. Chiefs at 49ers, probably the marquee matchup as far as like a real NFL terms on the Week 7 slate. This is a rematch of Super Bowl 57. I don't even know what Super Bowl we just had, 58. I can't remember. But Chiefs at 49ers. 49ers are 1.5 point favorites. Ho-hum game environment, 47 points is great. But the over is catching not as much steam as some of the other games. The DVOA matchups are about league average. The key matchups to look for here, I think we do get finally a big Patrick Mahomes game against the 49ers defense. They're going to have to score. They're on the road. The 49ers D has not been great against fantasy quarterbacks. They're 23rd against QBs this season. Jordan Mason has a brutal matchup, assuming he plays, and if he doesn't play, Isaac Guerrero is probably the one that you want to pick up and stream. But I think Jordan Mason will be out there based on everything that I've read, everything that I've heard from fantasy docs. This is a minor injury. He can play through it. It's probably not going to be a huge deal. Jordan Mason against the Chiefs' run defense is a bad matchup, though. Kareem Hunt versus the 49ers defense, a slightly better matchup. And then both wide receiver cores have bottom 12 matchups. So Ayuk and Debo and Worthy and Juju, not great matchups for them. Of the wide receiver cornerback matchups on the fantasy points matchup chart, it looks like Worthy has the easiest matchup of the Chiefs wide receivers, and Ayuk has the easiest matchup of the 49ers wide receivers. Kittle versus KC is a great matchup at tight end, and then Kelsey versus San Fran, not so much, but it is still Travis Kelsey, so you are starting him. Moving into Sunday Night Football, we do have a pretty interesting one, knowing that the Jets just traded for Davante Adams, and the Steelers just made a quarterback change to Russell Wilson. The Jets are 2-point favorites on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the second lowest over-under on the slate of 38 points. Not a very good game environment from a fantasy perspective. The key matchups to watch here, both quarterbacks not startable, even though I actually don't mind Aaron Rodgers' rest of season, because now that he has Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson, he's probably going to be a lot better as a passing quarterback, passing baseline on a weekly basis. I don't love him in this game environment on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Adams' first game. Both run defenses are top 12, so again, probably tough sledding for Breece Hall and for Najee Harris, although they are probably still in your lineup. Davante Adams is expected to see in his first NFL game with the New York Jets shadow coverage from Joey Porter Jr. Now, originally, coming into the week, this was slated for Garrett Wilson. Now, it's not confirmed that it will be Davante Adams. My kind of common sense, gut instinct, and fantasy points agrees with me, is that Davante Adams has been more successful in his career and probably today is the better receiver. So I think that they will deploy Joey Porter Jr. on Davante Adams, not Garrett Wilson, because I think he demands that type of coverage. And Joey Porter and Christian Gonzalez and Derek Stingley are the next couple of matchups for the Jets. So it'll be interesting to see how they play these two wide receivers, because whatever guy you put on the second corner or not getting shaded safety help or whatever is probably going to feast, because I think Garrett Wilson is good enough to beat shadow corners. I think Davante Adams is good enough to beat shadow corners, so we'll have to wait and see how they play this. If they play it like I think they're going to, Garrett Wilson could have a great game. Even despite Davante Adams coming over, I think he has a half-decent chance to be a good buy low right now if people are really, really worried. I'm not going to come out here and say that it helps him to have Davante Adams, but it does kind of help him a little bit in matchups where we would see a shadow corner, because Garrett Wilson probably not seeing that attention like he would have been before. Both pass defenses are top 10 in general, so not a great game environment just from a passing standpoint, and both defenses are usable for sure. If you wanted to use the Steelers defense at home against the Jets, definitely viable. I would prefer the Jets defense against the Steelers because Russell Wilson's kind of turnover prone, but regardless, I think they're both usable defenses there. Again, we do have a Monday Night Football doubleheader, Buccaneers and Ravens. I'm very excited for this game. Also very nervous as a Buccaneers fan, because anytime they put us on primetime, I get really worried that we're going to shit the bed like we did on Thursday night against the Falcons when we should have won that game very easily and we lost it in overtime. The Bucs are at home. Ravens are 3.5-point road favorites. The over-under is 49.5, so very high-scoring game environment. 93% of the cash on the over. Ravens DVOA versus the Buccaneers defense is second best on the slate, and the Tampa Bay DVOA versus the Ravens defense is top 12 on the slate. So this is, shaping up to be a very high-scoring game environment. The key matchups to watch here, we have both quarterbacks having top 6 matchups. So you are obviously starting Lamar Jackson. He is my quarterback 1 on the week, but Baker Mayfield also very much in play as well, which you guys probably know by now because he has been very good this year. Both run defenses are top 8, so tough sledding ahead for Derrick Henry and probably for, I don't know who's going to start for the Buccaneers at this point, whether it's Rachaad White if he's back or if it's Bucky Irving or Sean Tucker. I'm, as a Bucs fan, not a fantasy person, I'm happy that we have all 3 of these backs that look like they can play, but it is going to be a bit of a headache for fantasy, I think, going forward. Baltimore is 31st versus wide receivers. Tampa Bay is 30th. So if you are looking to start Chris Godwin and Zay Flowers and Mike Evans, they are in your lineup. No questions asked about it. And again, if you wanted a desperation play, I don't think Rashad Bateman is a bad option, knowing some of the people that are actually willing to start Bub Means on Thursday Night Football. Both tight ends are definitely streamable as well. Mark Andrews saw a big spike in his usage last week and had a top 6 week, so it looks like things are moving in the right direction for him. He might be still available on people's waiver wires, and I don't think it is terrible to go out and pick him up because he could turn into Mark Andrews of old. And then K. Doughton scored a touchdown last week, has a chance to be relevant in this one as well, and both kickers are obviously in your lineup. Chase McLaughlin and Justin Tucker both been very good this year. So Chargers at Cardinals, and this one really fucking irritates me as a East Coaster. 9 p.m. kickoff. We have to watch this at 9 p.m. when it starts. I like when last time this happened, when the Cowboys and Steelers played on Sunday Night Football, I went to bed at after the first quarter. I'm not trying to stay up till 1 in the morning to watch a football game, especially involving the Chargers and Cardinals. This game environment is still kind of interesting. 2.5-point favorites. The Cardinals are 43.5 over under, 93% of the money on the over. Pace of play is second fastest on the slate. So again, this is expected to be a pretty good matchup. Will I stay up for it? I have no idea. West Coast bros are probably, laughing right now because it's probably way better. 6 p.m. start type of game for them. But for us on the East Coast, it is going to be tough sledding. Justin Herbert versus Arizona's pass defense is very a favorable matchup. Are you going to mess around with Justin Herbert when he's been pretty much useless for fantasy this year? I would say probably not, but if you are desperate, I think you could do worse. Kyler Murray, not a very good matchup. 11th against the pass are the Chargers defense. Both running backs have league average matchups, although you're probably starting Dobbins and Connor no matter what. And both wide receiver cores have above average matchups. We will have to see if Marvin Harrison Jr. plays in this game because he suffered a concussion in week 6. He could clear the concussion protocol in time for Monday night, but he'll probably need a couple good practices. As a Monday night game, he's going to start practicing today. If he is out for practice, which I expect him to be, that is obviously bad news for him. On Friday, if he gets in a limited participation and then Saturday's practice, maybe a full participation, he could clear the concussion protocol. But I would say, 60%-ish chance that he is out. And I'm quoting directly from what I've heard from fantasy docs. That is not my medical background. I just expect him to probably be out. And Michael Wilson, also a half-decent desperation play at wide receiver. Ladd McConkey is getting great usage on the Chargers side of things, so he is probably in your lineup as a top 36 to 40 guy. And then Trey McBride is definitely in your lineup at tight end as about an average matchup this week. So a lot of games to talk about. Like I said, we had 30 teams in action this week, 15 games to go through. If you guys got some value from this video, if I helped you set your lineup, feel free to leave me any likes, subscribes down below. If you have any comments, I'll try and answer as many as I can. I usually try and get through the first 2 hours of the video being live. Try and get through as many comments as I possibly can there. So if you have any, leave them down below. If you do want to get a start sit question answered for sure, or trade question answered for sure, I will be live tonight on Thursday Night Football, an hour before kickoff. Danny will not be there. He's got a wedding this weekend, so it'll just be me solo like it was on Monday night. But I will get through as many of those Flock Fantasy start sit questions as I can, and maybe some free ones as well. So if you do want to skip the line, make sure your question gets answered. Head on down to the link down below in the comment. It says, ask us a question or get your team reviewed. That is in the description of all of our videos. You can submit a start sit question, a trade question, a team review, a super chat kind of question there, and we will cover that on the next live stream. So if that interests you, link down below in the description for that. Rest of season rankings fully up to date, link in the pinned comment for that. Underdog Fantasy, promo code FSE. You guys know what the drill is here. I do have a Thursday Night Football pick'em going right now. You could see Rattler over half an interception. We have Bo Nix higher than 5.5 rushing attempts. I think because of the tough matchup, he's going to run quite a bit tonight. Troy Franklin getting decent usage lately, higher than 21.5 receiving yards. Alvin Kamara, tough sledding, half PPR is the scoring format on Underdog, so I like the lower on fantasy points for Alvin Kamara in what I expect to be a Thursday night slugfest anytime the Denver Broncos are on Thursday night, it seems that it is one of the more boring games we get to watch. But if you guys want to tail this entry, you guys know what to do. Hit the link down below in the pinned comment. Underdog Fantasy promo code FSE will also get you this Bo Nix free square if you guys want to use it tonight, and you'll get up to $1,000 in bonus cash on your first deposit using that promo code FSE. And when you use our promo code, you also get our weekly start sit rankings manifesto, which is all the information that this video was made from: the Vegas totals, over-unders, implied points, DVOA stuff, the matchups of who has good matchups, who has bad matchups. All of that came from my weekly rankings manifesto. So if you want to, skip watching this video every single week, you can just get that by signing up over on Underdog Fantasy using the promo code FSE when you sign up. So if that interests you, link down below in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.